This is a special episode of History as It Happens, on location at the U.S. Army War College and Heritage and Education Center in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, with Kate Lemay and Molly Bompane. Hello, everyone. We continue our podcast this week on location in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Happy birthday, number 250 U.S. Army. Can we sing a quick happy birthday before I introduce you? Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Why are we doing
Happy
the
birthday,
birthday, dear
US
Army?
250 years, yes. I am at the Army War College and Heritage and Education Center from Root Hall here at Carlisle Barracks. Kate Lemay is back with me. She is the director of the Heritage and Education Center, running the archives, the library, the museum. Hello again, Kate.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I never knew you were such a great singer, vocalist.
Oh, God.
And our new guest, Molly Bompane. She is the curator who put together a marvelous new exhibit everyone should come and visit here, marking the Army's birth in 1775, 2.5 centuries ago. Hello, Molly.
Hi, Martin. Great to be here.
I've had so much fun with you today. In just the brief time we've had together, you walking me around this exhibit and some of the other stuff that you have in your museum. I said this to Kate earlier. I didn't know this stuff was up here. It is amazing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And let's talk about this new exhibit. Why did you build an 18th century tavern? We're talking 2.5 centuries of history for the U.S. Army. You decided to build a tavern.
We did. Well, we wanted to take our audience and visitors on a journey. Many are approaching the 250th of the Army's birthday and taking them through the Rev War timeline and the battles. And
Revolutionary War.
Revolutionary War timeline. Yeah. We wanted to back it up a bit to the time before the Army was stood up. So we could bring them into the 13 colonies, that feeling of what conversations were taking place, the courage it took to stand up an army, what they must have been feeling when they had to separate from Great Britain. And, just the tension, but the
uncertainty.
Yeah, the uncertainty. Because if it went south, it's treason.
Yeah, the urgency of the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah, these are not professional soldiers.
Right. It's all these militias. And so these conversations are taking place in taverns across the colonies. It's kind of a timeless tavern just to get people thinking about what it took to stand up an army. And that's why we decided to take in that direction and then really build a beautiful, immersive space.
Yeah, but by way of background, you've been doing curating for the Army for a long time, right?
Yeah, almost 20 years in December.
Right, yeah. I mean, the Army itself records its own history, the archives, the documents. Kate, you were telling me about all the documents. It's an army that fights wars, but it also has this wing, if you will, that's dedicated to preserving its past.
Yeah, and at the Army Heritage and Education Center, we pride ourselves because we are the premier archive of the United States Army. We have a lot of papers of influential veterans, soldiers of the Army, not just general officers or the chief of the staff of the Army, but also junior officers and enlisted officers that tells the history of the United States, but through an Army perspective and through their service. It's through a biographical lens, which I really, really love because you get that humanity, that element of the personal.
Yeah, I want to return to the feeling I got when I was in that tavern that you created. You built it by hand, right?
We did. We are fortunate. We're maybe the last remaining museum within the Army that has its own fabrication capability, and certainly we're the most significant in size. On the exhibit team that I run, we have 2 curators and 4 fabricators. And when I say fabricators, I really mean master craftsmen. They can do everything and anything.
Oh, the exhibit's remarkable.
Oh, they amaze me every time, and that was built in 4 months, what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, if a restaurant owner wanted to say, I want to open a theme restaurant, 18th century tavern, he would or she would come here to take a look at what you built in there. We're on a podcast here. People can't see what we're talking about. I will share photos and videos. historyasithappens.com. On Facebook, just search for History As It Happens. My Twitter @MartinDeCaro. You can see all the great stuff that's going on here.
I was going to say, Molly, you did some research about a tavern that actually exists,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
In Massachusetts?
Let's talk about
Okay,
the
sorry.
actual. No, that's all right, Kate. You can host the podcast if you'd like.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were going to get there.
No, we're gonna.
I was like, Molly.
No, so let's talk about the tavern itself. It's dimly lit as candlelight, right?
Yeah.
So it is modeled after a real place.
It is. We looked at a bunch of different taverns, and it was the Wayside Tavern in Sudbury. And I'm a native of Massachusetts, actually from Lexington. So I grew up with Revolutionary War history around me. The one in Sudbury I liked because that's where Longfellow wrote Paul Revere's Ride.
Oh, wow.
I know. So it has this nice literary connection.
It's very romantic.
It just had a nice look and feel. I was in one of the antique malls downtown here in Carlisle, and I found a book. I was looking at colonial architecture and design, and they had actual schematics for that tavern in the book. So we used that for the bar and some of the furnishings, and then the gentleman on the team ran with it.
I did notice one inaccuracy, though. Air conditioning. Okay, there was no air conditioning in the 18th century, and I walk into this beautiful exhibit, and you don't want to make the visitors suffer, but, taverns in those days, I could just imagine what they were like, smelly
Right.
and, everything.
Right. Well, I think you noticed too, because you said there's no
beer.
There's no beer, and that's a comment we've gotten before.
Well, no, you don't need visitors getting hammered, no.
Right.
So,
Welcome to the U.S. Army.
as I said at the top here, there's so many different ways you can approach, and you have a lot of, it's not just the tavern, you have a whole museum and other artifacts and materials about the Army's history here too. We talk about some of those as well. But when it comes to the tavern and we talk about the Revolutionary War and our founding fathers, you really wanted to place the focus on ordinary people, right?
Yes.
Why?
They're the ones that formed our first army. Here we have ordinary citizens and, all banding together and then meeting the need. It's still woven through Army history today, and that's really why we wanted to highlight that. Like this commonplace place is a thread through everyone's experience.
The decisions people in every generation make, should I go fight for my country
Right.
or not? Or
Exactly.
do I believe in this cause? I mean, what were Kate Lemay, the historian here, what were soldiers taught? I mean, you go through the archives, you've read letters, right?
Yeah.
Of soldiers in World War II writing back home.
Sure.
What were soldiers talking about?
Well, during the Revolutionary era, I think they were, like Molly said, they were debating whether or not they'd be tried for treason. And they felt like the circumstances were so unfair and they were being treated like these second-class citizens that they needed to stand up for their rights, to stand up for themselves. But the debates of how to do that, how to get there, it was like a civil war. Rick Atkinson has said that. It was like a civil war because people were fighting against each other and their beliefs. And really, it was not an easy decision. There's a lot of passion behind these
Molly,
decisions.
you wanted to jump in here?
Well, and Kate nailed it because, a lot of people, when we talk about a house divided, they think of America's Civil War. But between the loyalists and the colonists, like that divide and, you think of the family members on different sides of, of that debate, where their loyalty lies and like what kind of tension and angst that caused in the colonies. And like, it just, God, what a time to be alive.
Think about like
right?
Benedict Arnold.
That's right.
He was pro independence until he was mistreated, and then of course we know him as the great traitor.
Yeah, a name synonymous with treason for all
Exactly.
time. No, loyalists receive very rough treatment.
Exactly.
Especially after the war, a lot of them left. There was a book by Maya Jasanoff, Liberty's Exiles.
Oh, really?
Talks about how former loyalists were no longer, they didn't want to stay. They weren't welcome in a lot of places. Society, I think, healed, but not for everyone. It wasn't a civil war, but it had elements of a civil war. In any
Right.
society,
Right.
there's a healing process, a reconciliation process, bad blood.
I think historians are arguing right now, though,
Yeah.
that it was a civil war
Oh, wow.
in its own kind of sense. How you would describe the American Civil War of the 19th century, they think it's the same for the 18th century.
Wow. Yeah, I know Alan Taylor's done a lot of work on this as well, talking about a civil war within the Revolutionary War. Molly, yeah.
Oh, no, I agree. And I think and then you add the element of Great Britain, so this outside force, it may be, like the differentiating factor, but there's a lot for our audience to take in and start considering these things, celebrating such a significant milestone in Army history. And then, this tie of Army history is American history and how those two are just intertwined. And for a lot of people, they think it's, it's two separate things, but,
No.
our-
The Army's older than the nation state.
Yeah.
It's older than
And
17.
speaking of great power competition, to reference our previous podcast, one of the things that came to my attention about the Revolutionary War was through an object that we have in our collection, the musket.
Oh, yeah.
Can we talk
French
about the
musket. Yeah,
musket?
let's
The
talk about
French
that.
musket.
Yeah, the Charleville musket.
Yeah, I mean, the French and the British were fighting a world war,
Yes.
global war. So go ahead, Molly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the Charleville musket is really interesting because getting aid from our allies, and France was our ally, and that's where the collection really sings to us or speaks to us. We have the Charleville musket. It was produced in the Saint Etienne arsenal in France, and then we have all the different ordnance manuals, the infantry manuals in different languages that we received from different countries as we were building this army. So you start to see this evidence of creation of an army and all of how our allies played into it, how...
Because there's no industry. We weren't manufacturing that many weapons on our own.
Actually, we were in Carlisle Barracks.
Oh, wow.
Very fun, right?
In the Revolutionary War?
In the Revolutionary War, Carlisle Barracks actually had a foundry. And in the exhibition, we have this incredibly huge bellows. This is not a handheld thing that you point at the fire and sort of
For
pump.
millennials and younger who don't know what a bellows
is a bellows?
It's something you blow on a fire to keep
It's like a large, I don't know,
bellows.
like a fan or
Yeah,
something.
fan.
It
It's like a
captures
wind
air
bag.
and it's a wind bag.
Oh, it's a large wind bag.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
it's a
anyway,
large wind bag.
It's from the Revolutionary era. It has 1775 carved into it.
Wow.
And it was from Carlisle. And the way that they were making weapons at that time was through the foundry that was here in Carlisle.
Wow. But at the same time, getting rifles from all different countries, right?
And our arms collection speaks to this. Like we have the 1785 Springfield musket, and that came out of the Springfield Armory. And that was really one of the linchpins of us forging our own firearms. And that's when we really, truly, in my opinion, one of the things that correlates to independence, when you can arm yourself.
And have interchangeable parts.
Yes.
Special Forces trains at our Army Heritage and Education Center because we have all those different arms.
That's cool.
And
That
you
is
never
cool.
know what they're going to need to use on the field somewhere
That's
in
true.
some, other
I wish this
nation.
place was closer to where I live so I could visit it more often because this stuff is really fascinating.
2
If you're
hours. I'm just
I know.
saying, 2
If you're a
hours.
history nut, this is a great place to visit. The infantry ranks in the Continental Army, trying to get this army off the ground. These are just yeoman farmers, blacksmiths, right?
Right.
So the ideas of the Enlightenment, the ideas of the American Revolution, the idea of a society built on fundamental human equality as written in the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson, right? We know that certain Enlightenment philosophy, that's not maybe audible at the level of a yeoman farmer in the late 18th century, but it still seems like you're saying they understood, though, that this war was for their rights.
What they understood too is that, and this is Enlightenment, this comes out of the Enlightenment,
Yes.
is that an individual can make a difference. It's not the collective.
Yeah.
An individual can make those decisions to participate.
Something that has entered a consciousness and then becomes a movement, and then
Yes.
becomes
And
like
it
the...
became the movement
Yeah.
through the taverns.
Yes.
That
That's
bring it back to your tavern.
Yes.
Yeah.
When does
In-person experience.
ideas and attitudes, how do they coalesce into a revolution?
Right. Well, and the panel that we were looking at, Martin,
sure.
there's a quote on it.
It's okay if you get it.
Okay.
If you don't get it exactly right.
Okay, it's between Jefferson and Adams, and the reason I put it on there because it was in letters between each other, and they talked about this had been brewing a decade before the first blood was spilled at Lexington.
It's always hard to know when you're going to pass the point of no return.
Right.
And then it does happen.
Right.
And it's like a dam explodes and then there's no going back.
Right.
But it's hard to take that leap, right? Who wants to stick their neck out if other people aren't going to stick their neck out with them?
Right.
If you stick your neck out for the wrong purpose or the wrong
right.
calling,
Or if
you're
you lose.
a traitor.
How do you, Molly, as a curator, how do you try to demystify or maybe de-heroicize the past in your...
I think one of the things, and this is something Kate has brought to us, to simplify our narrative. It can be profound thoughts, but not overcrowd it and overwhelm people with too many things at once, but leave them with big thoughts. We get into the details. We'll talk more about that when we get into the objects. But really keep it at a higher level where they can consider a time, a place,
They
an
can
idea.
relate to it if they were there themselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And kind of give them the space to do that without overwhelming them with text and pictures. There's time and place for that.
When I walked into the tavern,
Yeah.
it was nice that there were only 2 placards to read. Kate knows I read every placard because I did it with her Smithsonian exhibits. I was there like forever reading
Yeah.
all this stuff.
That was
she-
a book on the wall.
To get to the gallery, you come through our permanent gallery, which is Soldier Experience. And that's a very dense dense exhibit, and it purposely dense, and it's layered. There's biography, but there's a timeline. So by the time our visitors hit this gallery, we wanted to kind of calm things down and give them some space to be
adjust.
Exhale.
to be ready to exactly.
One of you or both of you made the point before that this is the history of the United States, 250 years, and the United States has been at war for most of those years. And we think of overseas wars more recently, but the United States was fighting Indian tribes for a large part of the first 100 years of its existence. So Molly, I want you to think, while I ask Kate a question, I want you to think of some of the objects.
Okay.
We don't have time for all of them, but think of some of them that you want to talk about here. And again, I will try to pair this with some photos on social media. So I'm going to ask Kate this question. How do you have so much to work with here.
Yeah.
How do you decide what goes in an exhibit?
Yeah.
And what stays out? Is it just, we only have so much room? But that makes it even harder in a way, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, when you're a curator, or in my position, the director, kind of having a vision, we think about the story that we want to tell. And then we see if the objects we have in the collection are able to do that. The objects are the ones that punctuate the story. That is the narrative lead, if you will. You have to think about the object first and what it can allow you to say. And one of the tricky parts of curating is you don't want to speak for the object. You want to tell the object's history. You want to tell how it was made, or who made it and under what circumstances, who paid for it, those kinds of things. And that way the visitor can glean from the object some nuanced interpretation. But we're not here to interpret history in the sense of telling people what to think. We're here to say, hey, this object did this, 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 and then you line up the objects one by one, and that will tell your narrative. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I'm trying to relate as an audio person. Using audio to tell stories, you want to show with audio, right? Show in an oral sense. Show, not tell.
Yeah.
If the audio you have can tell a story, you don't then have to talk a lot.
Yes.
Right. It's like watching a movie with a narrator. Well, why does this narrator keep interrupting here? I can see the movie. I can see what's going on.
And Molly and I have training, right? We're art historians. Molly has an incredible amount of practical experience. I do as well. So this is easy for us, but I recognize it's not like second nature for most people, right?
No, and I hope visitors appreciate that, how much effort and how difficult this is. It's a form of expression. And so it's a different way of writing a book, if you will, right? Instead, you're putting objects up and also writing the plaques.
And that's why it's creative.
Yes.
So I actually got a lot of creative room for thinking when I was at the Smithsonian, and I definitely want to pay that forward to my team, because you need that time. You are creative. You have this story arc for your podcasts. So you have to really think that through. Well, Martin knows that I'm a big fan of Martin, but it's always good to remind you of that.
Oh, Kate, if you keep saying these nice things about me, I'm going to start wondering about your sanity here. No, I'm kidding.
Molly can attest. I'm mostly sane.
Yeah. So, Molly, let's talk about a couple of the objects that, because we talked about the tavern, to show people or make them relate or feel what it may have been like to be a person in the 18th century who's sitting there with his buddy and they're having a pint of ale and reading the pamphlets about the latest outrage from Great Britain or whatever.
Well, the interesting thing, how we curated this, the exhibit, we brought in our entire staff and then the leadership here at the United States Army War College, and we asked everybody to pick one object or item that resonated with them. And through that, organically happened this beautiful timeline of Army history, and really something for everyone. So it's their story about what resonates with them. It's shown through the different departments. So people get an understanding not only of these objects, but the different departments and professions go into maintaining a history organization, what it takes and why it's important. Boy, was it interesting. We had
toilet paper roll.
The toilet. Okay, so there's the
From
toilet.
Goebbels.
Yeah,
How do you say his name?
Goebbels.
Joseph Goebbels?
Yeah,
Goebbels.
Goebbels.
The Nazi propaganda minister.
Yes.
One of
That
his.
dude.
So it was
Some
captured-
American GI corps.
Yes, yes, and that was selected by our head of collections department, Greg Statler. That speaks to our collection, what soldiers, their material culture, what they wear, what they collect, all is a part of the collection that we have here.
There's like a can opener for...
So yeah, P38 can opener. That was Dwayne from our library division. And he loves it because he still uses it. It just shows the functionality. Any soldier would identify with it.
Because they didn't have anything
Yeah,
like that, right? They had like canned
Yeah.
goods, but they didn't have anything to open them with.
Yeah, to our millennials that may not, it looks smaller than a razor blade, and it's very odd looking. looking, but you can open a can with it. I think it comes in the MREs, and that resonates with all soldiers. Kind of like another thing we have, Martin, is what soldiers would call a whoopee, which is a poncho liner. I know.
You saw my eyebrows.
I saw the eyebrows raised.
WOOBI.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hopefully which is, another name for a kid's blanket, but it's a poncho liner. Any soldier from, Vietnam through current operations knows that. And that was picked by our registrar, Mike, and Kate has one.
My brother gave it to me. It's like the warmest thing in the world. I love it.
So this object, it made me think of something I just asked you about demystifying or deheroicizing.
Yes.
The life of a soldier. There's lots of courage and determination, and I tend not to use the word hero because it's overused in our culture. It was often a very miserable, especially in the 18th century, how miserable this was to be a soldier. And life was tough, period. So not just being a soldier.
And then they weren't clothed well, and they didn't have
hungry.
the appropriate things to be out in Valley Forge during the winter. There's
Disease,
just a lot. Exactly.
food, right? Yeah. So that's what the objects that you showed me there made me think of that. Also, another thing, we picture the Army, we think of the infantry. Right. Most people in the Army are not fighting on the front line. It's mechanics, engineers.
You've got your quartermasters, you've got the cooks, we try to show different, they call them MOSs, that the specialties, kind of the jobs that soldiers have, different vantage points for a couple different reasons, because we want our veterans that come in, I want everybody to kind of see themselves somewhere, but also show our visitors that the Army is complex.
One of the most fascinating, mind-bending facts about U.S. victory in the Second World War was the logistical marvel and industrial marvel that it was. To keep that Army fed and fueled in Europe and in the Pacific was just every time I read about it, I just can't believe that they actually did it.
Can I add something to
Yes, of course.
how
This is a
Molly
podcast. You can talk
curated
about
this?
anyone. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, because it occurred to me after Molly's beautiful brainstorm and idea to have the staff choose something from our collection to put in this exhibition. It showcases federal workers, why we are passionate about our jobs, how important our jobs are to us. We are all on the federal pay scale, and the leadership, of course, is active military. So we work with active military. But one of the things that I think is important about this exhibition is that, again, it shows the humanity of history. Why do we care about history? Well, one of our colleagues found in the collections the telegrams from the U.S. government to his great aunt about the missing in action great uncle. There's 6 different telegrams that basically follow the timeline of this uncle who was fighting in World War II, how he was missing in action, presumed dead. No, he's a prisoner of war, sort of follows this very difficult reality that the family must have gone through with each telegram.
Oh, it's wrenching. There's no Facebook. There's nothing. There's no way to keep in touch with people except the written
And
letter.
he chose that. That is his family.
When I was framing that one, I started crying. Maybe it was everything getting to me. And then you think about just what the family goes through. A couple of our selections really speak to the family experience.
So we'll wrap up with this then. On that note, people need to know that this is not just the Army War College. There is a heritage and education center here. There's an archive and a museum. As I mentioned to Kate earlier this week, embarrassed to say it yet again, I did not know there was a museum here. Your museum is ranked somewhere like one of the best.
We're one of the Newsweek's Reader's Choice named the United States Army Heritage and Education Center one of the top 10 free museums in the nation just this year in 2025.
Do you know how many people roughly come here every year?
Pre-pandemic, almost 200,000.
That's good.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, we are fighting to get those numbers. So in that sense, as the director, I'm really grateful, to you, Martin, because you're helping us get the word back out that, hey, we're here. We have this awesome facility. It's great for families. You'll learn something about being in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I kid around with you about Carlisle, Pennsylvania being, quote, I shouldn't say this because Molly might, throw a punch at me across the table.
Never.
Being in the middle of nowhere.
It feels like it's in the middle of nowhere, but we're like the crossroads of every
it's off a major highway.
Major highway.
Yes.
I guess what I'm saying is if people can find Mount Vernon and Monticello and all these other little tiny places that are also kind of far out, they can find Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and come here. This is a great
It's a beautiful
educational
drive, too.
experience.
They can, and they could stop in at Gettysburg. We're right on the way, and come here, and there's a lot to do.
Speaking of Gettysburg, it's almost July. I usually go up there every July from Washington.
We have staff rides. Oh, and Martin, we have a week-long national security seminar for people like you who are really interested in the Army War College and how we teach things. And you can be like a guest student for a week. And that's, lots of people can do that. I think you have to apply.
You'd be a good candidate.
You can get in touch with me. You can get in
Okay.
touch with me about that. All right. So one more time. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear U.S. Army.
I can't even say United States Army.
Uncle Sam.
Uncle
This is not
Sam.
Uncle. Uncle Sam is. When was Uncle Sam?
He came in 1898. We had caricatures of him.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Then.
All right. I stumped somebody here. Myself. Molly and Kate, thank you. I have loved my visit. In addition to these podcasts, I will share photos and videos from my visit. After all, it is better to see what's in a museum rather than just listen to a couple of people talk about it. History as It Happens is on Facebook, and my newsletter can be found at historyasithappens.com, or just go to Substack and search for History as It Happens.